Welcome to How Women Inspire. My guest today is Diane Osgood. She is a powerhouse in the world of sustainability. And I hope all of you have your own family strategy around sustainability. But if not, you're gonna hear and learn a lot today. She's the author of the forthcoming Your Shopping Superpower book and co-author of the best-selling The Carbon Almanac. With over 30 years of experience helping companies create sustainable and ethical products and services, my friend Diane is on a mission to change the way we think about what we buy and how we live. So get ready to be inspired and learn how to harness your own shopping superpower for a better planet. I am so glad, Diane, that we get to do this today.
I am too. This is wonderful. It's a subject near and dear to my heart. As women, we control the majority of household spending.
Like what, 85 to 90%, depending on
Yes.
Yeah.
And as I love to say, where shopping goes, the economy goes.
There we go.
You know, consumer spending is 70% of the US economy.
Yeah, that's humongous.
It's humongous. So literally, we are driving the economy, not the other way around.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I'll tell you, like my kids, my son in particular is always like, Mom, don't ever buy new clothes. You should always be, using one of these programs where you're sort of sharing clothes and send it
Yep.
back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Circular economy.
So yeah, I'm so excited to get into really explore it all. But before we really do, I would love to actually really get a sense of you by asking you if you were going to have an intimate dinner party with three women from history that you think are trailblazers. Who's on the guest list, and what are the burning questions that you want to ask them?
Well, my first person would be Eleanor Ostrom. She was the first female to win the Nobel Prize in Economics Sciences, and she got her prize and global recognition for her work to understand the global commons and the fact that we need to manage things like climate and the oceans and public parks in a way that are very different because they're common goods. And that understanding that she brought to us with her research and with her beautiful publications is one of the major underpinnings how we conceive and understand the crisis of climate that we face. Climate doesn't
I
know
want to
borders.
hang out with her for sure.
Yeah. So that's what I would love to hear her views on how we can tackle the global commons given the current state of the world.
Woo! Well, that's a high bar right now today in 2025 in April. Okay, who else are you gonna have at your dinner party?
So similar is kind of a parallel, and that's Eleanor Roosevelt.
Uh-huh.
She chaired the drafting committee that drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this is a fundamental underpinning of all human rights law and basically human rights practices and how we come to understand them. And I'd love to have a conversation with her about her views of universal values or universal these fundamentals at a time when all things universal are really being challenged.
Yeah, they sure are. Human decency and caring for others certainly feels like it's a job.
And the very notion that someone has human rights that are well defined
Yeah.
and we know where the boundaries are.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Diane. I love that. Okay. Do you have a third guest?
Oh, of course, Wangari Maathai. Now, she was the first African woman to ever receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And she won it specifically for the connection between the environment and peacemaking.
Yep.
And I would just love to hear her talk and to hear her views about, again, where are we now as we have climate change driving mass migration, increased poverty, and high risk? How would she help us articulate the need to make the connection between stability and peace and environment?
I love that. We have something program in our organization called Women Leaders for the World. It
Yeah.
actually started out of Santa Clara University, and I was a fellow. And that was really the first time I got to spend a week with global women leaders.
Mm.
And boy, did that shake up my perspective because we're all very nationalistic and think that the United States somehow has the corner on the market of something. And I really was stunned by the courage and the innovation that I was seeing from women movement builders around the world.
Mm.
In fact, we're actually doing a movement building cohort for leaders. My biggest thing is we've got to listen to these people who've really been successful in anti-fascist movements around the world. In the United States, we certainly have a lot to learn.
Couldn't agree with you
The
more.
lack of leadership is like a massive vacuum right now. Oh, I'm so happy to talk to you. So, can we talk about you and your experience, your own career even? I would love it in the next couple minutes for us to really sort of uncover both some wisdom and highlights from you, but also, like, where did this even come from? What's the impetus for this? How did you get this bug, Diane, where you are so
I got I got this bug a very long time ago. In fact, I just did the math, and it's so long ago, I don't wanna hit the number of years. But a very long time ago, when I was in my early 20s, I had the intense privilege of volunteering with Birute Galdikas, who's one of the great primatologists of our times, studying wild orangutans in Kalimantan in Borneo, on the island of Borneo in Indonesia. And, we'd sit on the dock, which was called in Camp Leakey, named after Louis Leakey, and we just see these big trees go float down, these logs, ginormous
yeah,
logs go floating down the river to be milled, and we could hear the chainsaws, and it's really tough work. I mean, this is not an easy environment to do anything in, much less I can't imagine chopping down trees. And I just had this very simplistic realization that if there was no demand for that wood, these men would find something else to do,
yeah,
right? They were doing it because they were gonna get paid because somebody
yeah,
wanted that wood. And that kickstarted my career. I ended up going to London to do my PhD at London School of Economics in environmental economics because I'm fascinated by how can we have economic growth that's good for the environment and great for people. And so that's been the golden question that has led me through my career.
wow, I feel like, that's such a beautiful visual, and right now when we think to circle back to your original statement, which is, if women are the consumers and the 70% of the economy in the United States is consumption, we could change the demand cycle and have a massive impact on where we're going and the impact on the climate in this country.
Absolutely, and at the individual level, it makes you happier.
Yeah,
So if we live in alignment with what we value, it's things are just easier,
yeah,
there's more joy, and there's a sense of satisfaction that outlasts the dopamine rush that you get from buying something on sale or, those sexy boots in the store. And that's a pretty short run pleasure, a dopamine rush, and it is chemically driven. Whereas buying with your values, it's a deeper experience. And we tend to hold on to those things a little bit longer, which is already a benefit. But we realize we're part of the economy. We're driving it. We're no longer victims of it.
I
We
love
get to shape it. We are shaping it, and the question
sure
is, are we
are.
shaping it with our values, or are we shaping it simply because we're act on
Impulse or
automatic pilot?
whatever, or the Joneses or whatever we use as the measuring stick
Yeah.
of what will motivate us. So you sat on dock watching the logs go down the river, and you went into school. What was it that was there a moment when you said, "Okay, I'm gonna write this book?" Maybe even start with your first, but then even your second book?
Well, I spent the next 30 years kind of during the PhDs and then later working with companies in various roles on what's easily called sustainability. So it's a term that covers a lot of things, but everything from product development to strategy to carbon emissions reduction plans and how to communicate that well through reporting. And about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I realized we'd forgotten the demand side of the
Yeah.
equation. And as an
You're an
economist,
economist.
I know that the demand side is the
That's
stronger side of
crazy.
the supply
Yeah.
and demand
Yeah.
equation,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
it's actually the demand. And as an entire profession, which, now corporate sustainability has grown into it, certainly wasn't that way when we started. We need to really embrace what is it that motivates shoppers and how can we enable them that they understand they're in the driver's seat.
So for the people who are listening, this is a beautiful concept, but then it's sort of like practicality can get in the way. What are a couple things people can do right now? Like, what are the things you can do to change your own practices?
It does take a couple of minutes to kind of think
Okay.
through and probably to do a little research. The good news is, once you research a product category or a brand, you don't have to do it again for a long
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
So I always counsel people on 4 points. One is start with one thing. So
Yeah, don't try
you
and
can't there's
spoil the
no
whole
perfect product,
yeah.
so give up on perfection. It's all about progress. But are you more concerned about the environment or about how workers are treated? Right now, just as a data point, 96% of fashion brands do not pay the workers in their supply chain, so the people stitching our
Yeah.
clothes, 96% do not pay a living wage. So that is a huge issue,
Huge,
particularly for
huge.
women, because most of those people stitching our clothes are women. And most brands do not ensure that they are paid a living wage. The vast majority, if it's 96%,
Yeah,
and
almost
that's a
everything.
pretty robust data point I have.
Yeah.
So you've got to pick, am I going to lead with environment? Am I going to lead with labor? I'm going to lead with supporting my community by buying local. Once you do that, make one change a week.
Okay.
And sure, you can get clever and decide, I'm going to buy something with a Rainforest Alliance or a high score on the chocolate scorecard because it covers both environment and labor, but keep it simple to start. And then one product, one change a week and avoid the worst. That's the easiest thing. Take a look at the lists of what products tend to have labor abuse in them. It's at the commodity level. What can I do to avoid? And they're easy.
Yeah.
Buying fair trade or equally certified coffee, tea, chocolate. I mean, it's small amounts of money
Yeah,
that makes a
right. It's an
difference.
extra dollar. It's not
Yeah, and even less. I actually priced it out 2 years ago, and it was 36 cents less per chocolate
okay.
bar.
All right.
I mean,
All right.
or more. And it's
Ever
like,
hear
am
that?
I not going to
36
spend
cents. Yeah.
36 cents to ensure that the farmers who grew this cocoa, which I am addicted to, I love, get fair wages? Of course I am.
Yeah.
But I needed to understand which certifications I could trust, and then boom, it's an automatic choice. I don't have to think about it again. I'm
Yeah.
as quick to buy that as I am to buy any product. So
Is there
those
a
are
place
the
where I
3
would
main
go to
steps.
find which certifications are the right ones, for example? Is that something you have on your website or
So I have a book coming out on April
in the
22nd,
book?
goes
All right,
into
good.
all of this in
Okay, great.
fair amount of length, and it provides a list of certifications that know are trustworthy and they are robust,
Yeah.
and I explain in as short of terms as possible what they cover, where you can find them, what products are covered by them, and I also provide a list of things to avoid, and that's kind of the easy stuff. Like, don't buy non-fair trade, non-fair labor, basic commodities, like we just said. Avoid palm oil. Why? It provokes deforestation, which is bad for nature and biodiversity, but also it's a driver of climate change. So there's some double kind of
Oh, it messes
wins
up
you
my
can get.
stomach. So, depending on, who you're talking to.
Well, that as well. I don't go into the health aspects. If there's one thing you can do, stop buying fast fashion.
There you go. I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth. And we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making a commitment that in the next 12 months, you can give yourself 12 months to figure it out and to take a step? I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you think about fashion, do you believe that the reuse economy is a big solution or just like a small little adjustment?
I think it has potential to be huge. It's just slowly changing the way we shop, and we see that as a generational shift. What's interesting is, the hardest part of innovation is business model innovation, and helping brands shift gears and try to figure this out is really difficult, and it's in their favor. They need to figure that out, and some real leaders are.
Yep.
So Eileen Fisher just came out not only with does she take back and sell secondhand, she's now selling repaired clothes. Was just announced. Patagonia, the leaders are still leading, thank
Yeah.
goodness. And there's an explosion of rental options. There's now this great one called rotation, where
Yeah.
it's like the Airbnb for your clothes. You can lend and borrow peer to peer. So all of these models, they're expanding, and we're slowly seeing what I call circular economy
Yeah.
developing, where you bring back the container. The other area I see slowly growing and is very, very exciting and necessary is certified regenerative agricultural products, particularly important for meat. So these are coming from farms that have set practices that actually help regenerate the soil, which is terrifically important for climate and for long-term viability of that agricultural production.
Is that in your book that we
This is all in the
so
book.
there's we all started buying organic and going to the farmer's market, but I don't know if that equals what you're talking about. Probably not.
It's a good proxy.
Okay.
Those are going to the farmer's market is a fantastic proxy,
Okay.
and you're having the other benefit of really buying local and supporting your community, and the book goes into why that's so important for your local economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, just more money stays in your community. So the book covers environment, labor, shopping local, and also buying from women and minority-owned businesses, and this is
Talk
something like
about that.
a
That's been my
nanosecond
jam for
on.
my whole career, right?
Yeah, and, again, it's pretty easy to choose to buy from a business that's women-owned or a majority minority-owned, and, again, you've got certifications to look for. You've got women-owned business. There's a great new certification, well, it's been around a couple of years, called Gender Fair. These are really great, robust processes that businesses have to go through to get these qualifications. Look for companies that carry those logos. And Buy Women Owned is a platform where you can just find,
Yeah.
from socks to shampoo. And we all know that DEI is under a huge amount of pressure. And so what I recommend in these times right now is actually a boycott, not a boycott, but a boycott by purposely going out and supporting women-owned businesses and particularly Black women-owned businesses, like Honey Pot, Brooklyn Tea, things like that. Things that companies that have been working super hard over the years and are under attack and under threat because of the shifts that we're seeing. So this is the moment to purposely, very specifically use your wallet to vote and to support these types of businesses.
I love everything you're saying, Diane. So just like plus, plus, plus all over the map. We're in this interesting moment right now. Sometimes things have to get really bad for people to actually really shift their behavior. And, I think a lot of us got lazy and appreciated the convenience of an Amazon and would
Mhm.
have packages coming, constantly. And right now, there's at least the women and people I know are like, I'm no longer buying from Amazon. And so, what is your choice then? Is it just Costco, or could you actually go to the locally women owned or woman of color owned companies and really sort of fully shift? And, my husband and I have these conversations, and it's like, I don't care if we can't find what we want, then we'll go without, because I'm not willing to put more money into the pockets of these people whose values are undermining everything that I think is important.
Exactly, and we have the habituation of buying online.
Yes.
It's like 2 more steps initially to find what you're looking for that's been made by a company and distributed by a company that is woman-owned, minority-owned, veterans-owned, that supports refugees, and on down the list, right? It doesn't take that much. And again, start with some of the easy stuff. Start with coffee, tea, candles, spa products. Those are so easy to
Yep.
buy that way.
Yep.
There's almost no excuse not to use that spending as a way to vote for a kind of economy that supports diverse businesses. And we know it's selfish because at the end of the day, we're going to live in a society that matches our values.
Well, and back to what you said earlier, you can also sleep well at night. The dopamine becomes like a nice baseline instead of like the necessarily the crazy spike. As someone who spent my entire life trying to make the world a better place, like I'm good. If I died tomorrow, I don't have any regrets because I've spent every ounce of my being trying to make the world a better place.
It's absolutely true that this does generate happiness and helps get off
It
that
sure does.
dopamine wheel.
And you feel when you take action I always say it's salve. If you take action to do this positive thing, it helps when you read when you read the news and you get depressed about yet again another blunder or horrific thing that the leadership in the United States. I don't know what your politics are, Diane, but I'm very disappointed with what's happening in our country at the moment.
Remember that where
Um,
your shopping goes, the economy goes.
there we go. So
It's
all of us
absolutely
have
true.
something we can do about this. I'm going to ask you, my economist friend, to be a futurist for a minute. If you think, into, 10 years from now, if we all read your book and everybody we know reads your book and we all put one practice in to start and another thing every week, how do you see the future of the world going? Not just the United States economy, but what would you like to see and what is it going to take?
Well, I'm gonna start with a little story first, which is to show you how few shoppers it can, depending on the product. So, when I started this work, fishing for tuna, canned tuna, was still done with long nets, and nets catch dolphins.
Yep.
It took
Yep.
less than 2% of shoppers to boycott the major tuna brands that could not verify that their tuna was coming from dolphin-friendly nets. 2%. It took 2 years and
Yep.
2%. That's nothing. Now that's a
Love
very
it.
narrow subject and so therefore it's easier to get to a tipping point. Something like single-use plastics, much more difficult tipping point just because of margins and how ubiquitous the products are. Boycotting a very large retailer is also hard to have an impact just because it's so vast, where a particular product, either doing a boycott or a Buycott, can have immediate impact.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you for that. So, if you have a one piece of advice that maybe that we'll call this a lightning round, if that's okay. I've got some quick questions for you. I can't believe how fast the time's gone on this call. You're amazing. Is there a piece of advice that you've received that stayed with you throughout your career?
Don't let the turkeys get you down. I was probably 7 years old. It's
Oh my
always
God.
stuck with me.
We need to remember that right now. What's a song that gets you pumped up for a big day?
Wild God by Nick Cave, or if I'm feeling a little more mellow, Push the Sky Away by Nick Cave. I'm a Nick
Okay,
Cave
there
fan.
you go. Nick is our choice today. Is there a book that you'd recommend to aspiring female leaders who want to be like you when they grow up?
Mine. Your
Yeah,
shopping
okay. There we
superpower,
go.
because
Easy.
regardless
There we
what
go.
you are in life, you buy things. We only vote every 2 years unless there's a special election. You vote for the world, for the economy every time you make a purchase.
Every time we purchase something. Yeah, that's beautiful. Is there a personal motto or quote that you live by?
No, they shift too often.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And how can people find you and find your book?
You can find my book at any independent bookstore. And if you'd like to buy online, go to bookstore.org, and then you can choose which independent bookstore gets the 30% commission. Or if you don't choose, they will put it into the pot and spread that around the independent bookstores at the end of the year. You can also buy on
Bye.
Amazon. You can also physically go to a bookstore. You can also find me at dianeosgood.com and on Substack, Diane Osgood.
Diane, thank you so much for all of your work. Thank you for giving us
Thank you.
such practical, easy to act on perspective. And I can't wait to read this book and get everybody I know to do the same. Thank you
Well,
so
it'd be
much.
great. And I'd love to come back and chat more once folks have read it, and that would be
There we
great.
go. Let's see how much change happens in the world. All right, everyone, have a great
Fantastic.
day.
Thank you.